I started with USASBE through George Solomon. I think many of you know Dr. Solomon. George was standing up with the group that was being recognized there just a little bit earlier today, and George has been a friend for many, many years. We actually, when I was with the NBA, used to sponsor a few of these events and some awards that were given out at these events, and so it's been a real privilege, and it's nice to be back and hopefully get re-engaged through this dialogue, but hopefully as a result of this conversation, when you go back, if you don't have a relationship with the SCORE chapter in your community, you're in a much better situation to set one up. And if I haven't given you a card, I'll be happy to help you do that. It's a good organization. I think there's some really good and valid reasons for us to partner, and I think in the end, not only do the students benefit, but the small business owners in the communities that we all serve really do benefit as well. I'm going to try to spend about 30 minutes or so chatting about entrepreneurial education, a little bit about what I've seen. I'd be very anxious to hear what you've seen. We're going to talk a little bit about policy. Although given that Congress couldn't agree that the sun was coming up tomorrow, I don't think we have to worry about much for the next year or so. I don't think there's going to be anything that's particularly earth-shattering, but some things that are out there. And last year, even though last year's the 112th Congress was the least productive Congress in history, including the Do-Nothing Congress of the 1940s, they did pass a bill that included crowdfunding for small business. And that's not a bad thing. So, there are people out there that are advocates, there are people out there that are interested, and we'll talk about some of that. I want to tell you about SCORE. For those of you that have been around SCORE for a long time, SCORE is very different today. We're focused differently. We're using different types of metrics to define our success. We're training differently. We're building tools and resources differently. And I'm anxious to share that with you, and I hope that through that you'll see the value of doing even more with your chapters when you get back. I have been with SCORE for 20 years. I can't find a job anywhere else. If anybody knows of anything, let me know. You just never can tell. I actually volunteered at a half marathon. I didn't run it. I know that wasn't a question. Just in case you were worried about that. And in order to volunteer, I had to get trained as a flagman with the Virginia Department of Transportation. So I actually am a certified flagman for the Virginia Department of Transportation. And I've got that going for me if this never works or something ever happens. So if you hear of something, I'm up to just about anything. So we'll talk about all of those things, and then we'll just have a dialogue amongst ourselves in terms of what you're doing and how you're using SCORE. If not, why not, and why you might want to think about it. So, most of you have been in the small business space as long as I have, and while you and I have focused on it very intently for the last 25 years, not everybody has. And it's really fascinating to see how small business has elevated in stature in terms of an economic force and the understanding that we all have now, the value of small businesses in communities and how they can create jobs and create wealth and how they contribute to the tax base, so on and so forth. We've always celebrated entrepreneurs, right? We know the guys that built big companies and the women that built big companies and did great things. But now we're really focused more on the value of that sector of the economy, that small business sector. And you see that in a lot of different ways. You see that in the conversations that we have when we talk about economics and about job creation and the importance of business formation and so on. For those of you like me that have been around a while, small business was talked about more in the election process over the last 2 years than probably it ever has been. Now that doesn't mean anything's going to happen, right? But you got to start somewhere. And you start by being in the conversation and by having information and understanding the value that this sector brings. And it's interesting to see that. It's also, you see it when you see major companies that begin to market directly to small businesses and small business owners as a group. When I was it started in SCORE, and Terry Lanier and I did some interesting things in San Diego, some meetings trying to bring corporate marketing people together with small business owners so that everybody could understand the value, and these corporate types would see small business as a true segment that they could sell to. And today, when you have companies that are completely focused on the value of small business and trying to sell into that market, and it's not just an adjunct to the individual market, what you and I buy for our own purposes, it tells us that we've arrived a little bit more than we have. I think that many of you are the reasons why that has occurred. You have been doing research over the years showing the economic impact of small business, the value of small business in a community, why it works, how it works, and research on what it takes to be successful. How can success be replicated? How can we avoid failure? How can we stop making preventable mistakes as a small business owner? And so a lot of the importance and the focus that you see on small business is a result of this group. You know, Denny does all kinds of research at NFIB that promotes small business and the value of small business. Don's been doing a lot. Terry's been doing things. You know, George Solomon, who I mentioned a little bit earlier, has been publishing. I think George publishes probably more prolifically than just about anybody around. And there's many others. And Kaufman, and how much value they have added by getting the word out and by creating a better understanding. And Coleman, and again, NFIB and the U.S. Chamber and the SBA and their Office of Advocacy. All of those groups have done a lot to elevate the standing of small business. And as a result, there's been a desire for this segment to improve. And as that desire manifests itself, we start creating things like SCORE and SBDC and Women's Business Centers and webinars and all of these different types of training materials and courses, whether they're college and university-based, community college, adult learning, all to support this segment that really is relatively new. And that's that whole entrepreneurial education piece. And not everybody's been doing it for that long, but what I would suggest to you right now is damn near everybody's doing it. You know, you think about a group that doesn't today want to have and you know, I get tired of hearing this. We want a deeper, broader relationship with our clients. You ever heard that before? You know, we want to understand, we want to be a trusted resource. And so we're going to give them all of these things that they need so that they can be more successful. And when they think about their success, they'll think about us, and they'll buy from us, and we'll increase our share of wallet in terms of the spend on whatever it is, and it's a good thing. You know, when I started in SCORE, SCORE did counseling and training, SBDC did. There were no women's business centers at the time. There was a great little program called SBI. Don, you remember those days. A great program that was university-based that SCORE participated in and SBA did. And there wasn't a whole lot beyond that was focused on training small business. And, you know, fast forward to today, in the last 4 days, I have seen 3 new online mentoring services for small business crop up, 2 of which are free. And, you know, somewhere in there's a revenue play. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but somewhere in there's a revenue play. And it tells you that today, entrepreneurial education is not just something that's done by the universities or by the NGOs or whatever. It's mainstream service that everybody's going to put out there, and now we're all competing. You know, the other interesting thing about entrepreneurial education is when I got started and when many of you got started, there were only a couple of entrepreneurial centers at colleges and universities around the country. I went to dinner last night at a place called Coco 500. By the way, if you're looking for a good restaurant, Cocoa 500 is really good. It's on Brannan Street. As you go around the corner off of 4th, there's an entrepreneurship center. About a 3-story building, beautiful, very modern glass, right in that warehouse district. Who would have thunk? 5 years ago, 8 years ago, that didn't exist. 20 years ago, it certainly didn't. How many of you were in programs that are entrepreneurially related that didn't exist 10 years ago? Yeah. Many of them you built, right? Many of them you built. Don, you were one of the very first there at Central Arkansas. So it's everywhere, and we're teaching entrepreneurship in our colleges and universities and our community colleges. My youngest son is just turned 13 in middle school. Came home the other day and said, "Dad, I'm in the entrepreneurship club." I said, "What?" He says, "Yeah, I'm in the entrepreneurship club." I said, "Good. Who's teaching it?" He says, "The PE teacher." Good. I said, "Well, tell him that I would be happy to contribute materials or time or whatever if that would be useful." And he says, "I already told him what you did, and he said he was fine." So, yeah. But it's everywhere, and people like Ed Davis at DECA, they've done a great job of making people aware. So, the whole face of this education thing is changing, and it continues to change. From a SCORE standpoint, and I'm gonna jump around a little bit. Everybody knows about SCORE. Would it be? Can I spend 3 minutes on SCORE and just kind of tell you where we came from? Would that be helpful to anybody, or does everybody feel like we're all friends here. Does everybody feel like they know what they need to know? You don't know what you need to know, so let's do it. So SCORE actually is in its 49th year of existence. We were formed in 1964 under the Johnson administration, the Great Society. At that time, the SBA was tasked with providing business and technical assistance, what we call counseling and training, to small business owners and aspiring small business owners, and they were using their federal employees to do that. And the demand was pretty high, and they were looking for options. Well, as it turned out, earlier in the 60s, in Wilmington, Delaware, a retiree from DuPont, who was forced out of his company at 60, decided that he was fortunate enough that he didn't need to go back to work, but he still had a lot to offer, and that he would begin counseling or coaching small businesses in their community. And he actually not only worked for DuPont, he was a DuPont. His name was Maurice DuPont Lee, and he pulled together some of his contemporaries, his colleagues, and they started offering counseling in Wilmington for small business owners and people that wanted to start. Well, it was a pretty good idea, and it was pretty popular. And back then, one of the great publications of the time was Reader's Digest. And you know how Reader's Digest has all these little anecdotes and stories and cool things that you can read about. And Reader's Digest wrote about this little group. And so these groups of retired individuals started popping up all over the country. And there were a good many of them. And in '64, the SBA decided that they would try to organize that group into a core that could offer this business technical assistance, counseling, and training. Interesting to note that the idea was a submission in an anonymous suggestion box that the SBA had placed out for some ungodly reason, because those damn things don't work, right? And so an anonymous suggestion in the suggestion box is what resulted in the creation of SCORE. They pulled together and chartered about 150 chapters on day one. The first 2 chapters were Washington, D.C. and Minneapolis. Minneapolis was first because at the time the administrator of the SBA was from Minneapolis. So those were the 2 first chapters. Fast forward, we're 360 chapters today. We're 13,500 volunteers across the country, and we really do 2 things primarily. The first is one-to-one counseling, mentoring, training for anybody that's interested. Typically, it is a small business, although we do counsel big businesses on an occasional basis. The other thing that we do, and of course that's available on just about any topic that relates to starting, managing, buying, selling a business. We do a series of workshops or seminars. We do about 11,000 face-to-face workshops or seminars each year through our 360 chapters. We're seeing in the neighborhood of 460,000 different businesses and individuals each year with one of those two services. Those services are also available online through our website at score.org, which has become a pretty significant part of our offer. We remain a very close partner with the Small Business Administration. They provide today about 50% of our funding. The other 50% comes from our foundation, which we started 10 years ago, and money that is raised by our chapters from fees for workshops or seminars. All in, we're about a $13.5 million company, not real large. Again, I'll say 13,500 people, 300 plus offices, and we only have 19 employees. Span of control is an interesting concept for us. And honestly, it works well. And it works well, I think, because of the fact we're a nonprofit and because we have the ability to draw some pretty broad fences within which we ask everybody to operate. We have a grant agreement. Don't violate that, please. Right? We have a code of ethics. We're very strict on how we allow our counselors to engage with their clients. They're not to accept money. They're not to refer them to businesses, things like that. So don't violate that. Okay, we're a not-for-profit organization, so please don't violate any of those IRS rules. And we have an operating manual that's really clear, and it says, you can do this and you can't do that, and there's not a lot of ambiguity, not a lot of gray area. And as long as you operate within the confines created by those 4 documents, you're fine. It's all consistent with the mission. You get outside of the confines of those documents, and we have an educational opportunity. And we can help you understand why it's not working. And if you choose to continue to do that, then we have the unpleasant task of suggesting you volunteer elsewhere. And it does happen on an occasional basis, but not a lot. So it's a very interesting group. And back in 2008, 2007, as the economy began to sour and we started seeing all the challenges that you all remember, we sat back as an organization and a board and said, there's more that we can do. But we're not organized right. We're not all on the same page with regard to mission, vision, goals. We really need to step up and take a serious place in helping our country to recover from this challenging time. And as we did that, we created a goal for ourselves, which was to help grow 1 million successful businesses by 2017. We started that in 2009, and that one big, hairy, audacious goal, whatever you want to call it, really started quite a change in the way that we operate and what we do. In order to do that, we needed to change the relationship we had with a client. And we need to make it into a relationship. Don would tell you, several of you that have been around, SCORE over time had become very transactional in nature. Come to SCORE, get a question answered. You need us again, call us. Otherwise, we will leave you alone. And while there was value in that, that's not the kind of information and not the kind of knowledge and not the kind of education that somebody needs in order to really make a difference in their business. So we embarked on a number of changes in our organization that would allow us to create that, I'm going to use these words again, that trusted advisor relationship, deepen and broaden that relationship between the counselor and the client. And it takes a lot of different forms. And so we started talking about that. We started measuring it. We have created a certification process that all of our volunteers are required to go through. It is not certification on business experience or how to do a business plan or marketing or anything else. It's how to create a long-term relationship with a client from day one. And we're beginning to do that. As we worked on that goal, we needed to define success. I don't know how, in a university setting, you define success for your program. Is it how many businesses are started by students before they graduate? Is it how many go on to be entrepreneurs? It's how many start businesses within 15 years of the completion of their coursework? I don't know exactly how you do that. What we decided was we were going to count businesses that started, so somebody that came to us that had yet to make a sale. Okay? Businesses started, jobs created, pretty important politically, right? And that's also a good example of growth. Sales growth. How many of our clients have said they increased their sales over a year? We're also looking at jobs saved. That's more political in nature than it really is valuable. But those are really the three that we look at. And then, I think even more importantly, we look at attribution. How many of these companies accomplished these things, but then said that their SCORE volunteer played a role in that accomplishment? Okay? So since 2009, we're a little over 500,000 small businesses on our way to our goal. Last year, 62% of the clients that had these successes attributed some portion of that success to the intervention that they had with a SCORE volunteer, which is a good thing, but it's only 62%, which means, and it was 54% the year before. It's great, but we need to move that number. When Noel introduced me, he talked about the numbers. Last year, we helped to start over 40,000 new businesses, and we created 67,000 new jobs, and 66,000 clients said they had an increase in their sales. And again, 65% of them attributed that to SCORE's intervention. Pretty good deal. Now, it gets even better politically when you think that we're creating businesses at a cost to the taxpayer of $173 a business. And we're creating jobs at a cost to the taxpayer of $104 a job, which makes us the most efficient, most effective business formation, job creation engine that the federal government presently funds by any measure. It works. And we can do a lot more. We have barely scratched the surface of what we're capable of. And what's unique about it too is because it's all based on volunteers, I don't have a labor cost. You know, what's one of your biggest challenges when you get ready to scale? I don't have that challenge. If I get to the point where we've got too many clients and we can't serve them all, we can just go recruit. And that doesn't cost us much money. You know, our cost to bring somebody in is minuscule. It actually costs us less to bring somebody in than it costs us to create a job or a business. So we're really uniquely positioned. Now, what I would also say is that as a nonprofit organization and a volunteer organization with only 19 employees, we're not out there to compete with anybody. We got a great service. How can we help you? How can we help other economic development organizations within their community? And heavens knows there's tons of those today, right? You know, back in the day, you didn't find all that often that a county or a city or a municipality had a dedicated individual for small business, and today you find that very often. We're finding great opportunities to partner both in the public sector and in the private sector. The state of Louisiana, particularly in the Baton Rouge area, as small business owners or potential small business owners come for aid to the state first sends them to SCORE. Every single one of them. And then we move from there. And then we help them understand challenges, we help them solve problems, we help them prepare applications, whatever it happens to be that they need in order to get the help that's required from the state. And we're finding more and more opportunities like that where we can be a first point of contact for any type of service that relates to starting, growing, managing, buying, selling a business. You'd think I'd said that before, more than once. It really can work that way. We're partnering with you'd be amazed. We have a brand new partnership with the NFLPA, the National Football League Players Association. And we are working specifically with the Retired Players Group. Now, I was a banker in Dallas in the 80s. Everybody remembers the Cowboys in the 80s, right? Randy White and Harvey Martin and all that group. And I was a banker, as I said, and the deal in Dallas was never lend money to a cowboy. Never lend money to a cowboy. That was just the kiss. Here now, the PA is actually paying SCORE to go to retired player meetings, talk about entrepreneurship, talk about how to evaluate business opportunities, how to start, and then offering one-to-one mentoring to both retired and active players. Not that hard. We're working with more nonprofit organizations, specifically trade associations, as well as franchisees. Anywhere a large number of small business owners are congregated and need help or might benefit from what we're doing, we're trying to provide our services. We've been counseling online since 1997 through email. We just rebuilt that system. We're getting a few additional bugs out of that technology, and then we're going to allow that service to reside on other sites. You know, anymore, I don't know how you manage your strategy from a web perspective, but it just doesn't make sense to me to try to drive traffic to my site anymore. I can't afford to do it. I don't have the time, the money, the knowledge, the horsepower. It's a lot easier for me to take my content and give it to other people. And if you use the thought process of, you know, I'm from Texas, and so my father-in-law still raising cattle and raises and sells hay, and if you know anything about that, you probably know how to find a needle in a haystack. Everybody know how to find a needle in a haystack? Orlando, you don't do it with a match. You know, we scouts would never allow that. Find it with a magnet, right? Okay, so if your client, if my small business was a needle in a haystack, what represents the magnets? What attracts them? Where do they go? Who's pulling them all together? NFIB's pulling a bunch of them together. So we're in a dialogue right now with NFIB on how we can move our content and our services to them and be able to serve their members on their turf, on their site, under whatever conditions they deem are appropriate. Yes?
So this is our plenary session on policy.
Yes.
And you're in a unique position to sort of know what's going on from a policy perspective. What is the likelihood that the federal government keeps funding anything remotely resembling SCORE under the current economic fiscal cliff?
That's a good question.
And what policies are being debated right now that will affect both your ability to do your job and our ability to do ours?
It's a very good question. You got me back on topic. Thank you. I think that it is unlikely that the SBA will go away. But almost a year ago today, the President proposed consolidating the SBA and portions of the Department of Commerce into a new agency that would have all of the resources that would be available for entrepreneurs in one place. And according to the President at the time, that was going to save about $3 billion in salaries alone over 10 years. So it's not chump change. That was proposed, and he did that actually on the same day that he elevated Karen Mills, the current administrator of the SBA, to a cabinet level position. Interesting, you know, SBA administrator, you're now cabinet level, and oh, by the way, I'm going to eliminate your agency. But until I do that, enjoy this new notoriety and power. That conversation has come back up again. It came back up in early December. I don't think the likelihood is great. What we know based on a GAO study is that the federal government spends over $5 billion a year on small business related programs. I think all of you know that every agency in the federal government has an Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization and does something that's small business related, almost always including entrepreneurial education of some type, typically very specific, but it's always there. The SBA is the only agency in the federal government that is solely dedicated to the support of small business. It also has a committee of the House and the Senate that's solely related to its oversight. Just for political reasons, I doubt seriously that either the House or the Senate would give up that committee and that leadership. So I think that the SBA is going to stay. The question then becomes, what's it going to look like? And, you know, I from a score standpoint, as I've said before, most efficient, most effective. We've got really good metrics in terms of business formation, job creation, and so on. Plus I have 12,000 people who vote. Let's just be real frank about that. The chances of them doing away with something like that aren't great. The chances of them consolidating it with a different program, cutting funding, something like that, probably 15%, maybe 20%, okay? Conversation about collaboration, not just between SBA resources, but between all agency, federal government-wide resources that support small business. Something could happen there. What agency do you think has the biggest small business program? Agriculture. The Agriculture Department's loan program is 5 times as big as SBA's. Okay, huge. Department of Defense, and they're doing all that on procurement and federal contracting issues. So, you know, so let's get back to the exact question. I think that it is unlikely that through the dialogue that's getting ready to occur on sequestration, funding for 2013, funding for 2014, I think it's unlikely that the SBA goes away. I think it's unlikely that a program like SCORE goes away. I do think that there are opportunities for consolidation. I don't know that that necessarily creates efficiencies, but it sounds good. You know, I mean, the federal government is not a business, and you can't treat it like that. It's a bureaucracy. These things, these programs that Congress complain about, they were all chartered and developed by congressional mandate. They may have grown into something different than they intended, but that's still where it all started. The lobbies are incredibly strong. The small business lobby, not as strong as some, but I think because of all of us now recognizing the importance from an economic perspective of small business, I think it's unlikely. I reserve the right to be completely incorrect. And that's just, you know, so through the foundation, so you know, through my foundation, I probably spend 20-25% of my time on the Hill. Most of what I do is related to SCORE, not necessarily related to other small business policy things, but I'm up there a lot. I'm on the Small Business Council for the Chamber. You know, I spend time with Denny and his group, and I speak a lot on things like that. So I'm probably not too far off.
That's why I asked you sort of what you see from a policy perspective coming down the pipe that is relevant to sort of the situation of entrepreneurship in the U.S. And I'm thinking specifically about, we had a brief moment in time where angel investments in startup companies were exempt from capital gains for a period of time. That was a cool, very cool, helpful policy. If anybody knew about it, it wasn't widely publicized. The question of changing immigration law to allow academic immigrants
Right.
who want to stay here and start businesses.
Right.
Those are the, what are you seeing on those kinds of issues? And,
Well,
and what do you think the likelihood is that those kinds of things will happen?
so a lot of those things were included in a bill that Senator Moran proposed. It was bipartisan with Senator Warner from Virginia. It was at that time considered Jobs Act 2.0. It included a number of tax provisions as well as the immigration provision that for those immigrants who received a certain type of a degree, typically STEM type, and that thought that they would start some sort of a business, that a green card would be attached to their diploma and they could stay and start that business here. He had a lot of support. Marco Rubio got on that bill, a number of others. Obviously, with the 112th Congress going away, all proposed legislation that was not enacted died. I feel confident that Senator Moran will reintroduce something along those lines. But interestingly, he is no longer on the Small Business Committee. Now, he introduced that bill outside of the committee, much to Mary Landrieu's dismay. So that was something that didn't go through small business to begin with. I think that Moran will reintroduce that. I think that that bill is likely to have some other provisions. I think that we'll be anxiously watching from a policy standpoint what happens with crowdfunding, how the SEC promulgates the rules that are out there. I am personally not in that dialogue, but we work with a lot of people that are. Despite what you might hear in the media and from some that it's not going well and that the SEC or whoever's going to really kind of pillage it and it's not going to be as valuable, most of the people that are in the dialogue are very positive about how this is going to look. And so I think that crowdfunding opportunity, sometime they're very late in getting the comments posted and everything else, but I think once it comes out, this is going to be something that will work for some portion of small business owners looking for equity capital. What's fascinating is that there are a few companies out there that have taken the crowdfunding idea and actually created a debt platform. So the crowd are banks from all over the country, and you can come in and fill out a single application and allow multiple banks to look at your opportunity, and the crowd might fund the additional equity portion of whatever project. So you can go in on both sides. You can go in on the crowd side looking for the 20% down that you need to do whatever you want to do on the debt side. So, I think what's fascinating about the way crowdfunding came around and the way this stuff is happening, this doesn't have a lot to do with public policy. This has to do with a bunch of entrepreneurs out there figuring out how to help entrepreneurs. And if you want to watch something closely and see what's going to have a lot of impact, I would highly recommend you watch that rather than watch Congress.
Right, no, you watch Congress to see if they're going to screw it up.
Yeah. And look, I don't think any one of us would want to trade places with anybody that's up there having to deal with some of these issues. It's huge, but deal with them they must. And as they do it, I don't think they're going to be worrying about a lot of the smaller things, including entrepreneurial education and things of that nature. Yes, ma'am.
At one point, I don't know whether it was passed or something, you could take your retirement funds earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And if you were in a small business, you wouldn't get taxed.
Correct. So,
That's still available?
yes, there are several firms. There are several firms that are out there that will help you take your 401k, 403b, you pull that money out and you invest it in the stock of your own business. And what these companies do is help you with that transaction, and also the way that works, there has to be a return. So and there's requirements in terms of paperwork and so on. For a fee, these firms will actually facilitate the transaction and keep up with all of the annual paperwork that results from that. Just one second, Tim. And it works well, but most people don't do it outside of buying a franchise. Because with a franchise, you have a proven concept that if you can follow the directions, it typically works. You think about it, you follow the directions and it pretty well works. And that's the kind of thing that you want to use your life savings for, something that is somewhat predictable in terms of outcome. For me to say, gosh, I'm going to go start a pizza chain and I'm going to take what little money I have left, most people aren't real comfortable with that. Tim, I know you're a franchise guy, so.
You're way smarter than the average bank. That's what happens. It's really active in the franchise industry. These firms are all over the place. You can get a lot of information there. And the reason, as Ken said, is the predictability is a little bit better. Maybe not as much as the IFA would like to do, but it's better. But then one of the problems is people draining our account. Franchises are fine for themselves, they just want the upfront money. Then there's no reserve, so they can't necessarily go back there and keep capping it. And there's a big difference. So where this came from, be really quick, because this is Ken's session, a lot of really wealthy people were taking early retirement, the classic IBM early retirement person. They had a huge nest egg built up there, several $1 million, and they weren't ready to retire. They were 55. So the thinking was, and this is what happened, let me buy a franchise, I'll run it for 5 years, it'll give my kids something to do so I don't have to support him or her. And a lot of those guys wanted to tap into their retirement accounts, so they were one of the pushes behind it. So, but there's some problems, because once you drain that account, you've defeated the whole purpose of having that nest egg. So from kind of an ethical point of view, there's some...
It can be questioned, but it can work. So let me hit back on policy for just a second and you know, what's going to happen. And I've said this a number of times at a lot of different places, I'm going to say it here. It's no longer enough for you to vote every 4 years. It's just not enough. You have got to be in regular contact with your member of Congress. And if you have things, you know, crowdfunding started because a bunch of people started contacting their senator and said, nothing's happening here. We need access to capital. Here's a market-driven way to get it done. You need to get off your behind and let's make this work. You have to be in touch on a regular basis. I'm in those offices a lot. I watch the phone ring. You know what? Those people, they're 19 years old. They make me feel like I'm 100. But they ask good questions. They take down the information, and it is regularly shared. And I believe that wholeheartedly. You've got to talk to these folks. You've got to make sure that they benefit from your thinking. If you think that there needs to be more access to capital, if there needs to be tax reform, if we need to have immigration reform that allows us to do whatever it is we want to do, you know, those that you've got to weigh in on it. It's just not enough anymore for us to go to the poll periodically and do it. And don't just do it at the national level. You know, there are state level laws and rules and legislation that both help and hinder small business. Same thing at the local level. A lot of states are doing really terrific stuff. Many of you are examples of that. The state of Arkansas, the state of Oklahoma, a lot of places are doing that. You need to make sure people understand and that your elected officials understand how valuable and how important this is to you. So I'm going to step back to SCORE for just 1 second. We are today very, very interested in how we can partner with other organizations to achieve our mission. And what we find is when we find the right partner, there is more than enough success for everybody to get all the credit that they need. Our goal is more to fulfill our mission than it is to read about ourselves in the paper, although reading about ourselves in the paper isn't bad. But to be able to do it with Oklahoma State or with Central Arkansas or with DePaul or with whoever it is a great, great opportunity. You know, we have these entrepreneurs and small business owners all over the country. And by the way, today, 69% of our volunteers have small business ownership or management in their background. And today, 39% of all of our new volunteers are still actively employed. So SCORE is no longer Service Corps of Retired Executives. It is just SCORE. And the teams that we're putting together in markets across the country are often very formidable. And they're there for the right reason, which is to help. So before we end, and we're going to in just a little bit, I want to make sure that I offer and suggest that when you get back, reach out to your SCORE chapter or reach out to me and allow me to make that contact on your behalf. Let's see what good things that we can do, not only for the community, but for the students. You know, to put them in touch with some of these pretty impressive entrepreneurs. Not bad. Anybody here from Omaha, Orange County, California? You know, the current chairman and CEO of Omaha Steaks is one of our volunteers. You can ask him a question online about online marketing. You ever bought a steak from them? Well, let me tell you, if you ever buy a steak from them, just try to get off their mailing list. That guy has forgotten more about online, internet, and email marketing than most of us will ever know. And he's offering his services for free if you just know how to find him. So I would encourage you. Now, I would also tell you, and I have a question here. Go ahead.
I'll make a comment.
Okay. I would also tell you that there have been times, and it still happens occasionally, where you wind up with the wrong volunteer. It happens. You know, they are all volunteers. When you wind up with the wrong volunteer, let me know. We'll get you another one. Okay? I mean, it doesn't always work, but it works about 95, 98% of the time. And it works in a really good way. And I think, Don, you're using SCORE, are you not?
Right.
Yeah. So anybody else here that works with their SCORE chapter locally? I know you do too. Okay, good. And you actually not just, you are SCORE. Thank you very much. So that's kind of an interesting thing, isn't it? So, yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to add that too. I love SCORE. I teach it. I run an entrepreneurial center in Kenneth.
Okay, Connecticut, good. Yeah, good.
When I started at Hard River School and SBA, and
Excellent.
we have SCORE on our premises. 3 other colleges
Thank you.
have modeled us. And I'm a SCORE counselor. I don't do the one-to-one, but I'm the liaison.
Great.
And then I tap the SCORE counselors as faculty. I mean, and then they mentor, they're right there on the premises of the college, and they mentor our students. They'll be there for judges for elevator pitches, and so it's just a fantastic,
Good.
all right, relationship.
Thank you.
Our chair of SCORE is was the president of another major university in
Okay.
Connecticut, so it's just, I mean, we love SCORE.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Question?
Going in a completely different direction, from your experience of talking to your 13,500 volunteers, what regulatory or compliance issue tends to be the one that sends a nascent business owner or someone with a business in to seek SCORE? Is it OSHA? Is it hiring and firing? Is it benefits? Is it tax compliance paperwork?
I think that it's probably even more simple than that. It's just, you know, the burdensome nature of incorporating or otherwise registering your business. What does it take to get, not, you know, I mean, you can, it's one thing to choose the right form, and we can help you do all of that, but it's just, you know, which office do you go to for this, and where do you go for that, and, you know, and what do I need to pay, and you mean, why do I have to drop these stubs off at the bank every Friday, and, you know, and then you start getting into other things. When you look at our client base is typically a business that is less than 5 employees, less than $500,000 in sales. Today, 53% of the clients that come to us are actively in business, 23% are completely nascent, and the balance are thinking about it or are in some stage of getting started. But they are what we call true small businesses. Not the SBA's definition, not, you know, maybe Denny's definition. They are true small businesses. They're very high on the motivation scale. They're high on the intelligence scale, but they're not high on the business knowledge scale. So when they go to change hats from, you know, being the professional that does whatever their trade is, to put on one of those hats that's either HR or CFO or whatever it is, when they struggle, that's where we are the best at helping them with that, or maybe helping them with their marketing or social media. And by the way, not only can we work with your students and so on, you and your students can volunteer. You know, we would love to have you.
We work both ways. We help SCORE with some of those, and they don't have expertise, and they help us. But I would say the people we're seeing and working with SCORE, it's usually compliance problems or marketing problems. Most of them are smart enough today. They know the profession. They know the product that they make, but they can't keep up with government regulations, and they don't know how to market.
Right.
Those are the 2 big things that we're
Right.
seeing.
And you know, when you talk to small business owners around the country, and you know, everybody says, well, the biggest issue is access to capital, access to capital. You know what? That is not the biggest issue. People, yeah, there's plenty of money out there, and if they had cash flow, they could pay the loan back, but they don't have cash flow. What they want is customers. They need more sales. They need a better bottom line. And so we spend most of our time doing exactly what Don is saying, talking to people about how they can grow their sales, how they can deepen and broaden that relationship with their client, how they can add complementary products to increase share of wallet, pick the right, consultantees. That's what we find ourselves doing the most. Yes, Mr. Consultant.
80% of the student business plans that you see these days have virtually no money in marketing. And you say, how are you going to find out? We're going to go viral. They all think they're going to go viral. It's hysterically funny. So we got a whole generation here that's buying too much into the movies of Facebook and whatnot, and they have no, and you start talking to them like an old person about traditional marketing, they think you're crazy. We just need a bunch of people to tweet about this.
Yeah, they also don't have revenue models, so.
Oops. Well, it's and isn't it a good thing that that y'all are there and others are there to help them understand that they're not quite complete. Not that they don't have a good idea, not that their dream's not really valid. They just need a couple of more pieces in order to make it be successful. Yes, sir.
Ken, do you have any international initiatives, programs?
So, SCORE was actually created, as I mentioned, in '64 by legislation. And the legislation is silent on international. Thus far, we have chosen not to ask permission. And here's why. We're seeing 460,000 businesses. We're creating 40,000 jobs and 67,000, 40,000 businesses, 67,000 jobs. We can do so much more here. We have so much opportunity here. We only have 19 people. To start thinking about what an international opportunity might look like is just it's just overwhelming. Now, are we asked regularly? Sure. Would not every country, lots of countries like to replicate SCORE in their country? Yes. Have we been asked? As a matter of fact, we're actually entertaining something right now, a country that would like for us to train their counselors using our methodology and that sort of thing, which is a little bit different, and we're thinking about it. But I feel like, our board feels like, we've just got too many things yet to do domestically. And, we can do these things a lot better than we're doing them right now. We did, when we created the foundation, one of the things, we had enough foresight that all of the things that we've built, our new Simple Steps to Start a Business program, Simple Steps to Grow, our certification process, all of that is owned by the foundation. So that we have the ability, when we're ready, to license that, either domestically or internationally. The way that our grant works is anything that's developed using the federal dollar, the federal government has a worldwide royalty-free license for everything. So everything that we've built with private sector dollars. We put it in a foundation so that when we decide, we can. But today, we don't have the bandwidth, and we're just not finished. We're not finished here. That makes sense?
We do some international things with our sister city relationships.
Yeah.
Which is a good way to partner.
And look, we have people from all over the world ask us questions on our online counseling. And what I tell our volunteers, answer them, help them, just don't report it, because it's not what the grant was intended for.
Don't report it.
Yeah, do not report it. It is a yeah.
It's non-counseling hours.
No, it's nothing. It's zero. It is unallowed under SCORE for you to do anything international.
Anytime
Yeah.
we work with international or people that
Yeah.
are not citizens of the United States,
Yeah.
it never happens.
Yeah, that's right. Well, and so, here's the good news. If you've done it, the Department of Justice is going to turn their head. It'll be okay. It's just, we want to help people. That's just not how we do it. Yeah, we want to help people. That's just not how we do it. What other? We've got about 10 minutes left. What other questions do you have about SCORE, about policy, about anybody? Yeah, Denny.
Have you ever, you keep coming into this issue of should somebody be required to pay some sort of something or other to you guys?
Right.
Is that kind of an ongoing discussion? Has it been settled permanently?
Where are we with that?
So the question, just to make sure I understand, is really, have we thought about charging
Yeah.
for our services? So today we charge for workshops and seminars. We don't charge for counseling, and that's actually by statute. In the statute that created SCORE, it says that our one-to-one counseling and mentoring will be free and that we can charge for workshops. As far as I'm concerned, that's the last word on it. You know, even though I like to think that we really do operate like a business, we're a not-for-profit. We're a charity. We're a 501c3 not-for-profit educational foundation. You know, our desire is to help people. And certainly it takes money, and certainly we have to be focused on the revenue side, but not so far do we need to do that.
You know, well, I'm thinking of it as more of a screen than as a revenue raiser.
We haven't done it, Denny. Not yet. Yes, ma'am, and then Terry.
At our college, it was an agreement to begin with the president, is that SCORE is paying rent, and we give them in kind, but they cannot charge.
Right.
Even for work.
Yeah, they couldn't anyway.
So it's a local.
Yeah, but even for the workshops, right?
Even the workshops.
Right.
They're at no
Right.
charge to the community, we're a community college.
Sure.
We're not gonna charge you rent, or, of course, I don't know what the state Connecticut's,
No.
Connecticut's in.
Do your best.
But
Thank you.
that was a local, do you know what I mean? That's a
Yeah.
local decision that, I like.
Yeah.
It's the community.
Yeah, well, we're the same way. Terry?
Sort of springing from that, over the last 5-10 years, what have you seen as the shift in the profile of your quote-unquote typical client and your advisor?
So the shift in the profile for the client, I would say, is that today they are far more knowledgeable and far more prepared.
And better educated.
Whatever, you know, I mean, and it's the proliferation of information on the internet. They rarely come to us as their very first conversation. They've been online, they've read some things, they might have gone to a webinar. You know, we have today we're putting 8,000 people a month through webinars on our website. And the only reason we don't do any more is that we just don't have the bandwidth for the people. So they have done something before they got there. So they're better prepared. They understand more about the process typically. Interesting to note, 80% of the people that come to see SCORE have at least some college. 30% have a postgraduate degree. You know, and so it's not that they're not intelligent and they're not well educated. They just don't have the business background. And so, in terms of the counselor, you know, you read and hear and see a lot about encore careers and re-careering and things of that nature. And so, in the past, we were mostly retired volunteers that came in. As I mentioned earlier, about 39% are still actively working. Most of our retired volunteers don't just do one thing. They're active in a lot of things. And SCORE is often no longer their number one volunteer opportunity. And so we're working to figure out ways to make the administrative side easier so that the time that they spend is more valuable. We're also figuring out ways to take administrative tasks and put them into smaller buckets, so running the chapter is a lot easier. You know, we still have the SCORE junkie out there. I was in Fresno this week, and you know, we have a chapter chair there that puts in 35, 40 hours a week. But you can't count on that anymore. Used to, I had a whole organization of chapter chairs that put in 30 to 45. They're not going to do it anymore. They have varied interests. We have loads of counselors that come in and that counsel for a year or two and then decide to start another business. Or they get asked to run a nonprofit in their community. Or someone, our Fresno chapter chair, resigned while I was there. Somebody called him and said, you know, I've got 14 Wendy's and it's not going real well and I could really use your help. And he was gone. I couldn't compete. I doubled his salary and he said no. I think that's the nature of the volunteer, and the way people volunteer today is different than it was when I started in SCORE. And I think it's going to continue to be different, and we're going to have to work on our business model to make sure that we can still do good things with the amount of time that our volunteers are willing to give us.
Yeah, I think the other change I've noticed is we're seeing more of the liberal arts degree people that they have a great background as far as education is concerned. Liberal arts didn't teach them how to run a business or to handle money, and that's the biggest change that I'm seeing. Well-educated people with great knowledge, but no business knowledge. And it's amazing how many liberal arts degree people that are coming in looking for help because they can't find a job. They got to start their own business.
Right. And we're still seeing those, I don't know, you want to call them incidental or accidental entrepreneurs, people who never set out as a goal to be a small business owner, but their life circumstances are dictating that they do something. Like they lost their job and they hadn't been able to find. And interestingly enough, the SBA and the Department of Labor are just kicking off a new program that's intended to move, unemployed to self-employed. And I mean, it's an interesting idea, and I think that there's some places where it can work well. Thank you very much. Yes, ma'am.
You have a program, and we just found out recently, a veteran comes to SCORE, gets counseled.
Right.
And if they fill out a form, then Walmart will give our chapter 50 or 25.
Right.
Yeah, we just signed up. We got our check.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. Can't we also have something, I always thought of, branding SCORE as something as crazy as, okay, I've been counseled by SCORE. And then you have that, and there's some credibility to it. And then you guys develop some relationships, whether it's Kinko or
Right.
who it is. You get a discount if you are a SCORE client.
Yeah.
Is that
That's no, it's not at all. And that's something that we've talked about a lot. So could there be a process, and if a small business owner went through that process, it resulted in recognition that then had value? At maybe you got, your first book of checks free and a quarter point off of your loan, and you got this or you got that. We have not been able to pull it together yet. It's still something that we would like to do. The idea of the Simple Steps to Start a Business workshop that we did, for those of you who don't know, we've just put out a new curriculum called Simple Steps to Start a Business. It's a 5-workshop curriculum that takes someone from a I think I want to start a business but I'm not sure, to a go, no-go decision. We did it, it was based on something done in Fairfield County, Connecticut and Lancaster, Pennsylvania. It was paid for by Bank of America, and it does result in a certificate. Well, it's not really an idea yet, but it's working in some markets like that. So it's a wonderful idea, and we have just yet to pull it off. You think about it, it's a little more complex than, but it's a wonderful idea. Yeah, thank you. We've like I said, we got a lot left to do. That's just one of the things. So we have reached the end of our time. Thank you very much for having a conversation with me. I hope that there was some value. I hope you'll take me up on my offer to introduce you to your local chapter if you don't have an introduction. I've got some cards right here. Please take one. I'll get back to you as quickly as I can if you call or email. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. I hope you enjoy San Francisco. I would recommend again Coco 500 and the Presidio Social Club. It's actually on federal land, so it's the only place in California where you can still get foie gras. Really interesting. So, that was kind of so wonderful restaurants. Enjoy your time. Thank you very much.